Have you ever noticed how anxiety seems to feed on itself? How one worried thought spirals into 10 more, until your mind feels like it's spinning out of control? What if I told you that ancient Buddhist monks discovered a way to stop anxiety the very moment you notice it arising, and that this technique has been validated by modern neuroscience? Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you'll understand why trying to fight your anxiety might be the exact reason it keeps winning, and you'll learn a counterintuitive approach that can bring you peace in seconds, not months or years. This isn't about positive thinking, affirmations, or pretending everything is fine. This is about something much deeper, much more powerful, and surprisingly simple once you understand it. Let me start by sharing something that might surprise you. Anxiety itself isn't the problem. I know that sounds strange, maybe even offensive if you've been struggling with anxiety for years, but hear me out. The Buddha taught that suffering doesn't come from our experiences. It comes from our relationship to those experiences. Anxiety becomes a problem not because we feel it, but because of what we do the moment we notice it. We resist it, we fear it, we try to push it away. We tell ourselves stories about what it means, and in doing that, we actually feed it and make it grow stronger. It's like being caught in quicksand. The more you struggle, the deeper you sink. Buddhist wisdom offers us a radically different approach, one that seems almost too simple to work, yet it's been transforming lives for over 2,000 years. The technique I'm about to share with you is rooted in the practice of mindfulness, but it's not mindfulness in the way most people understand it. This isn't about sitting cross-legged for hours trying to empty your mind. This is about something you can do right now, in this moment, whenever anxiety appears. It's about learning to be with anxiety in a completely different way, a way that immediately begins to dissolve its power over you. Before we dive into the technique itself, we need to understand what anxiety actually is from a Buddhist perspective. In Buddhist psychology, there's a concept called the second arrow. The Buddha explained it like this: when an arrow strikes you, it causes pain. That's the first arrow, and it's unavoidable. Life brings challenges, stresses, uncertainties. These are the first arrows. But then we shoot ourselves with a second arrow. We create stories about the pain, we worry about what it means, we catastrophize about the future, we beat ourselves up for feeling this way. That second arrow, the one we shoot ourselves with through our mental reactions, often causes far more suffering than the first arrow ever did. When it comes to anxiety, the initial feeling, that flutter in your chest, that tension in your stomach, that quickening of your heartbeat, that's the first arrow. It's just a sensation, a physiological response. But what do we typically do the moment we notice it? We panic about the panic. We think, oh no, here it comes again, I can't handle this. What if it gets worse? What if I have a panic attack? What if people notice? Why can't I just be normal? Why does this keep happening to me? And just like that, we've shot ourselves with dozens of second arrows. We've transformed a simple bodily sensation into a full-blown anxiety spiral. Here's where Buddhist wisdom becomes truly revolutionary. The monks discovered something remarkable through their meditation practice. They found that if you can simply be present with the first arrow, if you can observe the initial sensation without adding all those second arrows, something extraordinary happens. The sensation arises, peaks, and then naturally fades away on its own. It's impermanent, just like everything else in existence. But we never discover this because we're too busy panicking about the panic, too busy trying to make it go away, too busy running from it. So what's the technique? How do we actually stop anxiety the moment we notice it? It comes down to 4 simple steps, but don't let the simplicity fool you. This is profoundly powerful when practiced correctly. The 4 steps are: notice, name, feel, and allow. Let me break each one down for you. First, notice. This means becoming aware of the anxiety as it first begins to arise. Most people don't actually notice their anxiety until it's already quite intense. They're so lost in their thoughts, so caught up in their mental stories, that they miss the early warning signs. But with practice, you can learn to catch anxiety at its very beginning, when it's just a subtle shift in your body or mind. Maybe it's a slight tightening in your chest, a change in your breathing, a particular quality of your thoughts. The key here is to notice it without judgment. You're not trying to evaluate whether you should or shouldn't be anxious. You're simply becoming aware that anxiety is present. It's like being a scientist observing a natural phenomenon with curious interest rather than fear. Second, name. Once you've noticed the anxiety, Give it a simple, neutral label. You can say silently to yourself, this is anxiety, or anxiety is here, or I'm noticing anxiety. This might seem trivial, but naming what you're experiencing does something remarkable in your brain. Neuroscience research has shown that the simple act of labeling an emotion activates the prefrontal cortex, the thinking part of your brain, which actually reduces activity in the amygdala, the fear center. It's called affect labeling, and studies have shown it can significantly reduce the intensity of negative emotions. But here's the crucial part. You're not labeling to make the anxiety go away. You're labeling to create a little bit of space between you and the experience. You're recognizing that anxiety is something you're experiencing, not something you are. There's a you that can observe anxiety, which means you're not identical to it. This distinction is essential. Third, feel. This is where most people want to run in the opposite direction, but this is actually where the magic happens. Once you've noticed and named the anxiety, turn toward it. Actually feel it in your body. Where is it located? What does it actually feel like? Is it a tightness, a pressure, a vibration, a temperature? Is it hot or cold? Is it moving or still? Does it have a shape or a color if you were to imagine it visually? Get really curious about the actual sensations, not the story about what they mean or what might happen. This is important. You're feeling the raw sensations, not thinking about them. There's a huge difference between feeling your heart beating fast and thinking, oh my God, my heart is racing. Something terrible is about to happen. One is direct experience, the other is mental commentary. When you actually turn toward the sensations of anxiety with this kind of curious, investigative attention, something counterintuitive happens. The sensations begin to change. They might intensify for a moment, and that's okay. But then they start to shift, to move, to transform. You might discover that what felt like one solid block of anxiety is actually multiple different sensations. You might notice that the sensations are actually fluctuating constantly, arising and passing away, arising and passing away. This direct experience of impermanence is one of the core insights in Buddhism. Everything changes. Nothing stays the same. But we can only discover this through direct experience, not through intellectual understanding. Fourth, allow. This is perhaps the most important step and the most misunderstood. Allowing doesn't mean liking the anxiety or wanting it to stay. It doesn't mean being passive or giving up. Allowing means letting the anxiety be exactly as it is in this moment without trying to change it, fix it, or make it go away. It means dropping the struggle against it. This is what the Buddhists call non-resistance or acceptance, though acceptance is often misunderstood in Western culture. We think acceptance means resignation or defeat, but in Buddhism, acceptance is actually a profound act of courage and wisdom. It's recognizing reality as it is, not as we wish it were. Here's a metaphor that might help. Imagine anxiety is like a wave in the ocean. When a wave comes, you have two choices. You can see it coming and brace yourself, tense up your whole body, and fight against it. When it hits you, it knocks you over, tumbles you around, and leaves you exhausted and afraid of the next wave. Or you can see the wave coming and dive into it. You move toward it. You feel its power. You let it pass through and around you, and you come out the other side. The wave has the same amount of energy either way, but your experience is completely different based on your relationship to it. When you allow anxiety to be present without resistance, you're diving into the wave. And here's what you discover. The anxiety isn't actually as solid or as permanent as you thought it was. It's more like a flowing river than a solid wall. When you stop fighting it, when you stop shooting yourself with those second arrows, the anxiety loses its power over you. It becomes just sensations, just temporary experiences moving through you, not who you are. Now, I know what some of you might be thinking. This sounds nice in theory, but what about when anxiety is really intense? What about panic attacks? What about situations where anxiety feels completely overwhelming? This is a valid concern, and the Buddhist approach addresses this too. When anxiety is very intense, you might need to modify the approach slightly. Instead of turning your full attention to the anxiety all at once, you can use what's called pendulation. This means moving your attention back and forth between the anxiety and something neutral or pleasant. For example, you might feel the anxiety in your chest for a few seconds, then shift your attention to the feeling of your feet on the ground, which is usually neutral or stable. Then back to the anxiety, then back to your feet, Or you might notice the anxiety, then shift your attention to sounds around you, just listening without judgment, then back to the anxiety. This allows you to build your capacity to be with difficult sensations gradually, without becoming overwhelmed. It's like building muscle. You don't try to lift the heaviest weight on your first day at the gym. You start where you are and gradually increase your capacity. Another important aspect of Buddhist wisdom around anxiety is understanding the role of thoughts. Anxiety isn't just bodily sensations. It usually comes with a whole stream of worried thoughts. What if this happens? What if that goes wrong? I can't handle this. This is never going to get better. These thoughts are incredibly convincing. They feel true. They feel like accurate predictions of the future or accurate assessments of your capabilities. But here's what the Buddhist tradition teaches. Thoughts are just thoughts. They're not facts. They're not reality. They're mental events arising and passing away, just like sounds, just like sensations. The practice is to recognize thoughts as thoughts, not as truth. When you notice anxious thoughts arising, you can note them just like you noted the bodily sensations. You might say to yourself, worrying thoughts, or planning thoughts, or catastrophizing thoughts. You're not trying to stop the thoughts or argue with them or convince yourself they're not true. You're simply recognizing them as mental events, as movements in the mind, rather than identifying with them as who you are or what's definitely going to happen. There's a classic Buddhist teaching that compares the mind to the sky and thoughts to clouds. Clouds come and go. Sometimes the sky is clear, sometimes it's filled with clouds, sometimes there are storm clouds. But the sky itself is never damaged by the clouds. It's always spacious, always open, always there beneath whatever weather is passing through. You are like the sky. Your thoughts, including anxious thoughts, are like clouds. They come and go, they change, they're impermanent. But you, the awareness that notices them, the spaciousness in which they appear, that's always there, always undamaged. This perspective shift is incredibly liberating. Instead of being anxious, you become the one who notices anxiety is present. Instead of being your worried thoughts, you become the awareness that observes worried thoughts arising. This creates what psychologists call metacognitive awareness, the ability to be aware of your own mental processes. And research has shown that metacognitive awareness is one of the most powerful factors in reducing anxiety and preventing relapse in people who've struggled with anxiety disorders. Let's talk about why this Buddhist approach is so different from conventional advice about anxiety. Most conventional advice falls into one of two categories: distraction or thought challenging. Distraction-based approaches tell you to do something else when you feel anxious. Go for a walk, watch a movie, call a friend, exercise. These can be helpful temporary strategies, but they're based on avoidance. They're based on the idea that anxiety is bad and needs to be escaped from. And while they might provide short-term relief, they actually reinforce the message that you can't handle anxiety, that it's dangerous, that you need to run from it. Over time, this can actually make anxiety worse. Thought-challenging approaches, which are common in cognitive behavioral therapy, tell you to examine your anxious thoughts and look for evidence against them. If you're thinking, "What if I fail this presentation?" you're taught to challenge that thought by looking for evidence that you might succeed. While this can be helpful for some people, it still keeps you engaged in a mental battle with your thoughts. You're still treating the thoughts as if they're powerful and true enough that they need to be argued with. The Buddhist approach is more radical. It says you don't need to argue with your thoughts at all. You just need to recognize them as thoughts, as mental events, and let them be. There's a Zen saying that captures this perfectly: let the thoughts come, let them stay as long as they need to, and let them go. You're not trying to control what thoughts arise. You can't actually control that anyway if you pay close attention. Thoughts just appear spontaneously, like bubbles rising in water. What you can do is change your relationship to those thoughts. You can stop believing them automatically. You can recognize them as mental events rather than as truth, and when you do that, they lose their power to create suffering. Now, let's address something important. This Buddhist approach to anxiety isn't about never taking action. Some people misunderstand acceptance and mindfulness as meaning you should just passively accept everything in life and never try to change anything. That's not what Buddhism teaches at all. The Buddha himself took tremendous action in his life. He left his palace, he sought out teachers, he practiced intensely, he taught for decades. Buddhism is about wise action, not inaction. The difference is this: when you're caught in anxiety, when you're resisting what is, when you're lost in worried thoughts, you can't see clearly. You can't make wise decisions. Your actions come from fear and reactivity rather than from wisdom and clarity. But when you practice noticing, naming, feeling, and allowing, when you're able to be present with anxiety without resistance, something shifts. Your mind becomes clearer. You can see the situation more accurately. You can access your wisdom. And from that place, you can take whatever action actually needs to be taken, not from a place of panic, but from a place of groundedness. Let me give you a concrete example. Imagine you're anxious about a difficult conversation you need to have with someone. The conventional approach might be either to distract yourself until the last minute and then have the conversation in a state of high anxiety, or to spend hours mentally rehearsing and trying to predict every possible outcome, which just increases your anxiety. The Buddhist approach would be different. You'd notice the anxiety about the conversation. You'd name it, anxiety about the conversation. You'd feel where it lives in your body and what it actually feels like. You'd allow it to be there without trying to make it go away. And from that place of acceptance, from that place of being present with what is, you might realize that you need to prepare for the conversation in some way. But your preparation would come from clarity, not from anxious rumination. You'd be able to think through what you want to say without getting lost in catastrophic what-ifs. You'd be able to show up to the conversation more grounded, more present, more able to respond to what's actually happening rather than to what you feared might happen. This is the power of working with anxiety rather than against it. When you stop fighting the anxiety, you free up enormous amounts of energy and mental clarity that can actually be used for wise action. The fight against anxiety is exhausting. It takes up so much of your mental and emotional resources. When you drop that fight, when you practice allowing, you discover you have much more capacity than you thought you did. There's another profound Buddhist teaching that's relevant here, and it's about the nature of self. A lot of anxiety comes from what we might call self-concern. We're worried about how we'll be perceived, whether we'll succeed or fail, whether we're good enough, whether we'll be safe, whether we'll be loved. All of these concerns revolve around a sense of there being a solid, separate self that needs to be protected and defended. Buddhism teaches that this sense of a solid, separate self is actually an illusion. It's a mental construct, not an ultimate reality. When you investigate your experience closely through meditation, you discover that what you call yourself is actually a constantly changing flow of sensations, thoughts, emotions, and experiences. There's no fixed, solid thing that is you. Now, this might sound abstract or philosophical, but it has direct practical implications for anxiety. When you begin to see through the illusion of a solid self, when you recognize yourself as a flowing process rather than a fixed thing, there's less to defend, less to protect, less to worry about. Anxiety loses one of its main fuel sources, which is this intense self-concern, this feeling that there's a separate me that might be damaged or threatened. As this insight deepens through practice, anxiety naturally begins to have less grip. You're still a functioning person. You still take care of yourself and make plans and do what needs to be done. But there's a lightness, a freedom, because you're not so tightly identified with the narrative of me and my problems. I want to be clear about something. This Buddhist approach to anxiety isn't a quick fix. It's not a trick you can do once and never feel anxious again. The Buddha never promised that following his teachings would eliminate all difficult experiences. What he promised was an end to suffering. And suffering, in the Buddhist sense, comes from our resistance to experience, not from the experience itself. You might still feel anxious at times. Life is uncertain, things happen, your nervous system responds. But with practice, your relationship to anxiety transforms completely. It stops being this terrifying enemy that you have to fight against at all costs. It becomes just another experience, another sensation, another movement of energy in your body and mind that arises and passes away. And here's what practitioners discover over time. The more you practice being present with anxiety without resistance, the less frequently intense anxiety actually arises. It's paradoxical. When you stop fighting anxiety, when you stop being afraid of anxiety, anxiety itself decreases. It's as if anxiety feeds on resistance and fear. When you remove that fuel, when you meet it with presence and acceptance instead, it gradually loses its power and its frequency. This doesn't happen overnight. It's a gradual process. But it does happen, and it's been witnessed in countless people over thousands of years. Let me share a practice you can start doing right now. Find a comfortable position and close your eyes if that feels okay, or just soften your gaze. Take a few deep breaths, not trying to change anything, just becoming present. Now, scan through your body and see if there's any anxiety present. Maybe there is, maybe there isn't. If there is, notice where you feel it most strongly. Maybe it's in your chest, your stomach, your throat, your shoulders. Bring your attention to that area. Feel the actual sensations. Remember, you're not feeling your story about the sensations, you're feeling the raw sensations themselves. What's the quality of these sensations? Are they tight, loose, moving, still, hot, cold, sharp, dull? Get really curious. Stay with these sensations for a few moments. Breathe naturally. You're not trying to breathe the anxiety away or fix it. You're just being present with it. Notice if the sensations change at all as you pay attention to them. They might intensify briefly. They might soften. They might move to a different location. Whatever happens is okay. You're just observing. And now see if you can create a sense of allowing these sensations to be exactly as they are. You might say silently to yourself, "It's okay," or "I can be with this," or "Let it be." You're not pretending to like it. You're just dropping the fight against it. Stay with this for as long as feels right, and when you're ready, gently open your eyes. That's the practice. It's simple, but it's not necessarily easy, especially at first. Your mind will want to jump away from the sensations into stories and thoughts. That's normal. That's what minds do. When you notice that happening, just gently bring your attention back to the direct sensations. Over and over again. This returning, this gentle coming back to direct experience, this is the practice. This is how you train your mind. This is how you develop the capacity to be present with difficulty without being overwhelmed by it. One of the beautiful things about this Buddhist approach is that it's completely portable. You don't need any special equipment. You don't need to be in a particular place. You can practice this anywhere, anytime anxiety arises. Sitting at your desk at work, lying in bed at night, standing in line at the grocery store, right before an important meeting. The moment you notice anxiety, you can practice noticing, naming, feeling, and allowing. It's always available to you. You have the tool with you at all times. It's also worth noting that this approach is supported by a growing body of scientific research. Studies on mindfulness-based interventions for anxiety have shown remarkable results. Research has found that mindfulness meditation can be as effective as medication for treating anxiety disorders, and the benefits tend to be longer-lasting because you're learning a skill, you're changing your relationship to experience, rather than just temporarily altering your brain chemistry. Brain imaging studies have shown that regular mindfulness practice actually changes the structure and function of brain regions involved in anxiety regulation. The amygdala, your brain's alarm system, becomes less reactive. The prefrontal cortex, involved in emotion regulation and rational thinking, becomes more active and more connected to the amygdala. These aren't just subjective feelings of improvement. These are measurable changes in your brain. But here's something important to understand. The goal of Buddhist practice isn't to produce these brain changes or to eliminate anxiety. That would just be another form of resistance. Another way of saying anxiety is bad and needs to be gotten rid of. The goal is actually much simpler and much more profound. The goal is to be fully present with life as it is, moment by moment, whatever arises. To meet each experience, pleasant or unpleasant, with awareness and acceptance. The reduction in anxiety is a natural byproduct of this practice, not the goal itself. When you make reducing anxiety the goal, you're actually reinforcing the message that anxiety is a problem that needs to be solved, which creates more tension and resistance. But when you simply practice being present, when you develop the capacity to meet each moment with awareness, anxiety naturally loosens its grip. I want to address one more thing before we wrap up, and that's the question of when professional help might be needed. The Buddhist approach I've shared with you is incredibly powerful, and many people find that it's sufficient for working with everyday anxiety. But if you're experiencing severe anxiety that's significantly impacting your daily functioning, if you're having frequent panic attacks, if you're finding it difficult to go to work or maintain relationships because of anxiety, or if you're having thoughts of harming yourself, please reach out to a mental health professional. These Buddhist practices can be used alongside professional treatment. They're not opposed to therapy or medication. In fact, many therapists now incorporate mindfulness into their work. The two approaches can complement each other beautifully. There's no shame in seeking help. The Buddha himself sought out teachers and guidance on his path. Asking for help is a sign of wisdom, not weakness. So let's bring all of this together. Buddhist wisdom teaches us that anxiety becomes a problem, not because we feel it, but because of how we relate to it. When we resist it, fear it, and try to push it away, we shoot ourselves with second arrows and create a cycle of suffering. But when we learn to notice anxiety with awareness, name it with clarity, feel it with curiosity, and allow it with acceptance, something remarkable happens. Anxiety loses its power over us. It becomes just another experience, temporary and ever-changing, like everything else in life. This doesn't mean we'll never feel anxious again. It means we transform our relationship to anxiety so completely that it no longer causes suffering. We develop the capacity to be present with difficulty, to ride the waves rather than being knocked over by them. This capacity, once developed, doesn't just help with anxiety. It helps with all of life's challenges. It's a skill that grows stronger with practice, a source of freedom and peace that's always available to you right here, right now, in this very moment. The Buddhists have been sharing this wisdom for over 2,000 years because it works. Not because it makes everything pleasant, but because it frees us from the unnecessary suffering we create through resistance. And that freedom, that peace, is available to you starting right now, in the very next moment that anxiety arises. All you have to do is notice it, name it, feel it, and allow it. The wisdom is simple. The practice takes commitment. But the freedom it offers is real, profound, and waiting for you to claim it. Thank you for watching, and may you find peace in every moment, exactly as it is.